Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to 2013's Youth Bike Summit. This is my first time speaking. My name is Devlynn Chen. I'm currently a senior at Bronx High School of Science. I'm 17 years old, and I've lived in the same building in the Lower East Side for my entire life. I'll be going to Dickinson College this fall, and it's going to be different than living with 9 million people, since Dickinson is in a rural town. Where I grew up, the population is predominantly Chinese, Dominican, and Puerto Rican. Down the block to the left, the Puerto Rican and Dominican people will be playing loud salsa music to a game of stickball, while the block on the right would be Chinese people doing Tai Chi or dancing. There would be a couple of people from out of town emerging from the East Broadway train station, asking for directions. From the East Broadway train station, you could spot the great blue Manhattan Bridge that cars, bikes, and pedestrians use to travel every day to and from Manhattan. Crossing the bridge would lead me to the East River Park, which is under the FDR Drive. I have a favorite bike route that starts on the Allen Street Pedestrian Mall in Chinatown and ends at the waterfront in the East River Park. The East River is a great source of view, and my father likes to take my bike out sometimes and ride to his favorite fishing spot. He's caught a fish or two, but it's mostly just time for him to relax and enjoy the scenery. Summers are my time to relax and enjoy the sun. During the summer before sophomore year, I was introduced to Local Spokes Youth Ambassador Program. Local Spokes is a coalition of 9 community groups based in the Lower East Side and Chinatown. The program seeks to engage and understand the community's various perspectives through multilingual outreach. 2 summers ago, I wasn't old enough to get a job, but I was too old for summer camp. That's when I heard about Local Spokes. Through a teen program from Asian Americans for Equality, I was told that I would be learning about bikes and the Lower East Side community. I thought, hey, why not? I've lived here all my life, and I know nothing about the neighborhood except for the fact that the East River was in the east. I could tell my mother that I spent the whole summer learning and exercising on a bike. She would definitely approve, since I wasn't wasting away in front of the television, as she likes to call it. In that program, I was amazed about how much I was able to learn about the Lower East Side. I remember the time where we went to the High Line in the Meatpacking District. We would have Naomi or Karen, both from Mellow City, in front of the line. Rochelle, our program coordinator, would be in the middle, and Lisa, a bike mechanic and former student from Recycle a Bicycle, was in the back. She was what we called the sweep, which was the person who made sure nobody was left behind. Even though I've lived here all my life, Local Spokes allowed me to explore my neighborhood in new eyes. The High Line was one of the new spots in New York City that I've never been to. We went to Madison Square Park for lunch and learned about the history of the Flatiron Building. Then we went to the Hudson River Greenway, which was similar to my East River Greenway, but bigger. When we got to the High Line, we learned about the history of the High Line being an abandoned railway that passed through the meatpacking buildings. Then, we learned about how local organizations rallied together to support transforming the High Line into a green space. This was linked to how Local Spokes wanted to do the same thing, but instead of rallying for green space, we wanted more bikes and bike lanes in our community. An intriguing thing was that every man-made thing on the High Line talked to you, except for the chairs and the floor. The water fountain spouted facts about New York City and running water. The bathroom sink talked about how one could save water. And the elevator gave us some history on the High Line. After the first summer at Local Spokes, I was offered an internship at Recycle a Bicycle in the East Village. As an amateur biker, this bike shop was my first glimpse of the bike world. With 500 square feet, which is about the size of this stage, It is the smallest bike shop I've been to, but it's just as impressive. In the front half, there were racks of bikes. There were some wheels and handlebars hanging from the ceiling. This was a bit hazardous when a customer wanted to look at a wheel or handlebar, but it gave the shop a cool look. In the back, there were a few stations where the 4, sometimes 5, mechanics would be working on bikes. Through this internship, I learned that if I were to work at a bike shop, I'd have to start lifting weights. A fond memory of working at the shop was doing the Bernie, when the song Moving Like Bernie came on. For those of you who don't know the dance, you tilt your head up like you have a nosebleed, and then you walk around with your arms flapping like so. And I will demonstrate. All right, that was Lisa. Thank you, Lisa, for doing that. This was a welcome goof-off during the late afternoon when things were slow and everyone was a bit tired from the morning. My internship at Recycle a Bicycle led me to my longest bike ride. It was 6 miles long to the Recycle Bicycle in Long Island City, Queens. I was going to the warehouse to build my own bike, and getting there involved 2 bridges, many slopes, and a lot of familiar faces. Lisa, who was once a student like myself, was bringing me to LIC, since I've never been to the workshop in LIC before. I had never traveled across a bridge by bike before, so it was a new experience. The first bridge we had to cross was the cherry red Williamsburg Bridge. The first time I crossed the bridge, I struggled to bike up the slope. Then I struggled to maintain speed on the flat part of the bridge. Of course, you're thinking, Devlynn, it's the flat part. Stop being such a wuss. But you don't understand. It's about a mile of straight riding after climbing a slope so steep it puts the Mount Everest to shame. Luckily, Lisa was with me the entire time, and she was very encouraging. She was like my personal trainer, except she wasn't as hardcore as Jillian from the TV show Biggest Loser. After I conquered the flat expanse of the bridge, I became overwhelmed by the speed of going downhill, while I quietly smirked at the other people going in the opposite direction. When I got off the bridge, I was drenched in sweat, but I was wearing the brightest smile in the neighborhood. So on the Kent Avenue bike path, I saw a lot of people from Recycle a Bicycle and Local Spokes. It was a pleasant surprise to bump into the new people I met through Local Spokes. Being a part of Recycle Bicycle and Local Spokes has exposed me to so many biking activists, such as Dylan from Hester Street Collaborative, Pasqualina from Recycle a Bicycle, Karen from VeloCity, Shelma from Asian Americans for Equality, and Inbar from the Department of Transportation, to name a few, who all share biking as a passion. And for that, I'm very grateful that Local Spokes allowed me to meet these amazing people. After the Williamsburg Bridge, I had to cross the Pulaski Bridge, which wasn't as long, but it was very narrow. I did bump into the side a few times because I was very nervous, but the first time for everything is difficult because you're not used to it. But I had to go back to LIC without Lisa the next day to work on my bike. And I got there and back with no trouble. So on a side note, I'd like to thank the Department of Transportation for placing such reliable signs that led me to the Williamsburg Bridge without confusing me. As you may know, Hurricane Sandy hit the New York area in late October. People living on the coast had their homes flooded and swept away. Before Sandy passed over us, the electric company turned off the electricity. The shuttles protected the subway trains from Sandy. The mayor closed all the bridges. I lived across the street from the East River, so before Sandy hit the shore, the storm surge flooded the parking lot of my building. Many people couldn't get to their cars in time, and water flooded a lot of cars, including our old one. There was about a foot of water that came into my lobby. This resulted in some flooding in the elevator shafts and floor damage. So when the sun came up, I went to look for my best friend Susan, but the cell towers were down and no one had cell service. Luckily, Susan lived on the first floor, but she had no doorbell. Troublesome. So I took some pebbles and I tossed them at her window. She thought they were birds pecking at the window until the tapping became violent. Sandy made old-fashioned communication very necessary. Otherwise, I would have been walking by myself. As we were walking, we saw trees as old as my great-grandma blown over, like fragile towers made of newspaper. It looked like lumberjacks decided to take on the city. After day 3 of no electricity, I was going a little berserk, being cooped inside and being limited to doing nothing in my neighborhood. Since there was still no electricity, my family was able to get groceries from Chinatown, but we still didn't have enough batteries for light. Since I was bored, my auntie pants made me do something crazy. I brought my blue Ross bike down the stairs for 17 flights. Yes, 17. My biceps grew at the same alarming rate as Popeye the Sailor after that. I headed up to First Avenue going uptown. This was what my surroundings looked like until I hit 39th Street. No traffic lights, enough parked cars to fit on one hand, no people, and no shops were open. It was like a ghost town. What I did see were people on bikes. I usually see at most 5 bikers on my half-hour bike rides, but it was 10 to 20 bikers with me at all times. There were bikers taking up half the lane in every block. Everywhere I looked, there was a biker. After a while, I rationalized why there were so many bikes on the road. No electricity meant that subways didn't work. The bridges were closed to cars, so even if people wanted to use their cars, the gas pumps couldn't work without electricity. Electricity and gas could get you nowhere, so people had to depend on their feet. Biking was the only option for people who had to go to work uptown and live downtown. I'm sure that people who owned bikes at that time loved their bikes enough to marry it. For those people who didn't have bikes, they wished they had bikes. Just like those people who didn't have Lamborghinis might wish that they owned a Lamborghini. Although, I'm not sure how you would be able to use a Lamborghini without gas. From 1st Street all the way to 39th Street, there were no lights in my way, no cars. It felt like Summer Street, which in New York City is where Park Avenue is closed to cars on Saturday, and pedestrians and bikers were welcomed. Except the Summer Street had mini theme parks every few blocks. My journey uptown would have never happened unless I did local spokes. I was used to riding on the streets by myself on a bike and felt comfortable to applying it when I needed to go on a trek in search for batteries, which, by the way, was not easy at that time. I wanted the really big batteries, and every single drugstore in Manhattan was out of batteries. Probably not every single drugstore, but I went to every single drugstore on 1st, 2nd, and 5th Avenues for 55 blocks. I gave up and resorted to going to a gift store for candles. And no, I was not crazy enough to carry my bike up 17 stairs. I locked that bike up outside. In addition to the internship, I was able to meet many people through my whole time with local spokes. I met people who were approximately the same age as myself and loved biking. An example is Lisa, who you met. Lisa is an important person who has made an impact on my life. She was my mentor, who was a constant companion through all the local spokes projects, bike rides, and recycled bicycle internships. I benefited from tagging along and gaining advice from Lisa. Then I met adults who incorporated biking into their everyday life, and their enthusiasm for biking was so contagious that I caught their bug. On a bike, I was able to experience so many firsts. I met my first vegan Liz. I rode over my first bridge. I caught my first fish with my dad, which, by the way, was a sea robin. And for those of you who don't know, sea robins are really loud and really ugly. It was the first time I built my own bike. I went onto the Hudson River Greenway and the High Line for the first time. I am giving my first speech, and in March, it will be my first time going to the National Bike Summit in DC. I want you in the audience to do what I did. Try something new on a bike. You can explore a new neighborhood with some friends. Everything is scary for the first time around, but if you do it once, I can guarantee the second time will be a blast. I want to thank Recycle a Bicycle for giving me this opportunity. I want to thank everybody from Local Spokes, especially Lisa, for leading me through this process, and my friend Johanna for supporting me through everything. It is a pleasure being here, and I hope to see everyone at the National Bike Summit in Washington, D.C. Thank you.